All right, so today we're taking a look at something pretty fundamental to computers, and that's storage solutions.
Yeah.
And, when we talk storage, one term pops up all the time that can be a bit intimidating and a bit mysterious: RAID.
Uh-huh.
So, redundant array of independent disks or drives, right?
Yep.
Lots of people are curious about it, and we're going to do a deep dive today. Think of it like we're going to walk you through it.
Right. It seems like it's a really technical concept, this whole RAID thing, but it's actually pretty practical when you get down to it. And anyone who uses computers and deals with data, from just your personal family photos to keeping a business running,
Mm,
understanding RAID is really insightful, actually.
absolutely.
And at Stonefly, as a solutions company for over 20 years, we've seen this firsthand.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly what this deep dive is all
Mm.
about. We're going to unpack what RAID is, all the different levels: RAID 0, 1, the more
Mhm.
complex, 5, 6, and 10. We really want to give you a clear understanding of when and why you might consider using RAID, but also to highlight some of the complexities
Yeah.
involved, because it's not as simple as it sounds.
It's true.
So before we get into all the nitty-gritty details, I
Yep.
think it's important to step back and just talk about what RAID is trying to achieve. And really, it comes down to two things.
Okay.
One is to make things faster, right? How quickly your system can access data by using multiple drives at the same time.
Yeah.
And the other is to provide some backup, some redundancy.
Yeah, some resilience.
So if a drive fails, your system keeps running.
Yep, that's it. But the thing is, it's not always as simple as that.
Yeah.
Because not all RAID levels give you both of those things.
Right.
It really depends on what you're looking for and which RAID level you pick.
That's such a good point to make. I think sometimes there's this idea that, it's just plug and play. You just add a drive, you set up RAID.
Right. Like it's just another USB drive.
Exactly.
Just plug it in, it'll just work. But the reality is, especially when you get into things like motherboard RAID versus dedicated hardware RAID,
Right.
it's so much more complicated than that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's important to remember that. It's not one size fits all.
And how your operating system interacts with it, that can be tricky too.
Right.
So I guess this is where our deep dive is going to be really helpful for you, our listeners, because choosing the wrong RAID level or even setting it up incorrectly can actually make things slower, like literally the opposite of what you want.
Absolutely.
And in the worst case scenario,
Yeah.
it can put your data at risk.
Yeah.
It's about making informed choices based on your specific needs and what the downsides of each configuration are.
Absolutely. And at Stonefly, we've been helping customers navigate all this complexity for years.
Yeah.
It's something we really specialize in. It's about building storage solutions that actually work for you.
So let's get back to the basics. What is RAID exactly? We
Yeah.
keep using the term.
Okay, so RAID, as we've been saying, stands for Redundant Array of Independent Disks, or some people say Redundant Array of Independent Drives.
Yep.
It's the same thing. The basic idea is you take several separate hard drives,
Yeah.
and your operating system sees them as one big drive.
So like instead of your computer seeing, I don't know, 4 separate drives,
Yeah.
it just sees one big storage space.
Precisely. And so you can take all those little drives and make one giant virtual drive out of them. It's pretty cool, actually. And this is, the core concept behind a lot of Stonefly's NAS and SAN solutions, this whole idea of RAID arrays
Yep.
that are integrated and managed. But the magic and the differences between all the RAID levels is how those drives are combined,
Got it.
how that data is distributed across the drives. And it's really important that we address one very common misconception right now.
Okay.
RAID is not a backup.
Right. That's huge. And that's something that Stonefly is very careful to always mention when we're talking to clients about data protection.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people hear the word redundant and they think backup.
Right. Redundant means I've got 2 copies, so I'm backed up. Right.
Yeah. But, RAID, it offers redundancy, meaning your system can keep running if a drive fails,
Right.
but it doesn't protect you from other types of data loss.
Ah, okay. So like what other kinds of things are we talking about?
Well, think about it. What if your computer gets infected with ransomware?
Right.
Or there's a fire in your building?
Yeah.
Or you accidentally delete a critical file?
Uh-huh.
RAID can't recover that data.
Right.
It's really designed to keep things running if a drive fails.
Okay.
That's its primary function. For comprehensive data protection against all those other threats, you really need a separate backup strategy.
Got it.
And that's something that, Stonefly offers with its backup and DR solutions. They're specifically designed to address those scenarios. So RAID is one part of the puzzle, but backups are another essential piece.
That's a really good point. So RAID keeps things up and running if a drive fails,
Right.
but it's not going to get your data back from a big disaster.
Right. Exactly.
All right, so let's get into the specifics, those basic RAID levels. Where do we start?
Let's start with RAID 1.
Okay.
It's often called mirroring.
Mirroring, okay.
In a RAID 1 setup, you typically have two drives, and the exact same data is written to both of them at the same time. So you basically have a perfect copy of your data on a second drive.
So if one drive fails, the other one's got a complete copy, and you can just keep working.
Exactly. And that's the main benefit of RAID 1. It's a really simple way to recover from a drive failure. You just replace the failed drive. The system automatically copies the data from the good drive to the new one,
Right.
and you're back up and running. And it's also great for workloads where you're doing a lot of reading data.
Oh, okay.
Because the data is duplicated, the system can actually read from both drives at the same time,
Right.
which can make things a lot faster, especially if you're accessing data randomly.
Got it. So it sounds like a really safe option,
Yeah.
this mirroring. What are the downsides?
Well, the main trade-off is storage efficiency.
Okay.
In RAID 1, you're essentially only using half your total drive space because the second drive is just a mirror.
Right.
So if you have two 1 terabyte drives, you only get 1 terabyte of usable space.
So you're paying for the whole drive, but you're not using the whole drive.
Exactly. And your write speed, how fast you can write data, is limited by the slowest drive in the array.
Because it has to write to both at the same time.
Right, exactly. So it
Okay.
has to keep up with the slower drive.
Okay, so it's great for redundancy.
Yeah.
It's got some read performance benefits,
Yeah.
but you're only using half your drive space.
Right.
When would RAID 1 be a good choice?
It's a good fit for smaller setups where basic redundancy is critical and that 50% storage efficiency isn't a big deal.
Okay.
So think of a small business server with limited drive bays that needs to make sure data is always accessible.
Right.
At Stonefly, we often recommend RAID 1 for boot volumes, for example,
Yeah.
or smaller data sets where uptime is really important.
Got it. So situations where you absolutely can't afford to have any downtime,
Right.
RAID 1 makes sense.
It's exactly.
Okay. Now what about RAID 0?
Okay.
That one's all about speed. Right.
Got it. RAID 0, also known as striping.
Right. Yep.
It's basically the opposite of RAID 1 in terms of data protection.
Okay. Interesting.
So with RAID 0, the data is broken down into smaller segments, and these segments are written across all the drives in the array. It's like splitting a file up and putting different pieces on different drives.
So instead of having, the whole file on each drive,
Right.
parts of the file are on different drives.
Exactly. And this allows for a huge increase in both read and write speeds, especially for large files.
Okay.
So when you're reading a big file, the system can access different parts of it from multiple drives at the same time, which is much faster.
Got it. So it sounds like a fantastic way to make things really fast and maximize your storage space.
It is, but
There's got to be a downside, right?
there is a big downside.
What is it?
There's no fault tolerance at all.
Oh, okay.
So if even one drive in the RAID 0 array fails, all the data on all the drives is lost.
Oh, wow. So one drive goes down and everything's gone.
That's right. Because the files are split up across all the drives, if one drive fails, those pieces are missing and you can't reconstruct the whole file.
So it's speed and maximizing capacity,
Yeah.
but at the cost of data security.
Right.
Who would actually use this?
So typically RAID 0 is used for non-critical data where speed is the absolute priority and you're okay with the risk of data loss or you have other backups in place.
Okay.
So for example, in video editing workstations, RAID 0 might be used as a high-speed scratch disk, but the final edited video would be stored safely somewhere else.
Got it.
At Stonefly, we're really big on data protection, so we generally advise caution with RAID 0.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's really for those niche cases where performance trumps everything else.
Okay. So RAID 0, speed versus safety.
Yeah.
Clear trade-off.
Absolutely.
What about RAID 10? That sounds like it's combining the two.
It is.
1 and 0.
Exactly. RAID 10 is a hybrid configuration.
Yep.
It combines mirroring from RAID 1
Right.
and striping from RAID 0.
Ah, okay. So you get the best of both worlds.
In a way, yeah. It's like having multiple mirrored pairs of drives that are then striped together.
So you're getting that data protection of mirroring.
Yep.
But also the speed enhancements of striping.
Right. You get a good balance of performance and fault tolerance. You can usually lose one drive in each mirrored pair without losing data.
Okay.
And it also offers really fast rebuild times because when a drive fails, you're basically just copying data from its mirror.
Right, so there's a copy already there.
Exactly. And RAID 10 tends to perform really well for both random reads and writes
Okay.
because of the way the data is striped across those mirrored sets.
So it sounds like a good option. What are the downsides?
Well, storage efficiency is still a concern, just like with RAID 1. You're typically looking at 50% overhead. So if you have 4 1 terabyte drives, you only get 2 terabytes of usable space.
Right.
And it can also be a bit more complex to set up compared to RAID 0 or RAID 1.
Okay.
You need to make sure you configure those mirrored pairs correctly. And there's one specific failure scenario to be aware of. If both drives in the same mirrored pair fail, you lose the entire array.
Right.
So you need to be mindful of that.
And you said it was harder to expand, right?
Yeah, expandability can be a bit tricky with RAID 10. You can't just add a single drive to easily expand the array.
Got it. So while it's a strong combo of performance and redundancy, you do pay for it with storage capacity and a bit more complexity.
Yeah.
When would you recommend RAID 10?
It's a popular choice in enterprise environments where you need both speed and high availability.
Right.
And fast rebuild times are really important.
Okay.
Think of database servers or virtualized environments.
Got it.
But even with RAID 10, at Stonefly, we usually add additional backup and disaster recovery solutions on top.
Right.
Because even RAID 10 is just one part of the data protection strategy.
It's about layers of protection.
Exactly.
All right, so we've covered the basic and the combined RAID levels.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the more complex ones, starting with RAID 5.
Okay.
I've heard that involves something called parity. What is that?
That's right. RAID 5 introduces this concept of distributed parity.
Okay.
So in a RAID 5 array, data is striped across all the drives, just like RAID 0,
Right.
but with one key addition, this parity information. It's basically a calculated value based on the actual data,
Okay.
and it's also spread across all the drives. And Stonefly, with all our experience building storage solutions, we understand the trade-offs you make with RAID 5 when it comes to performance and redundancy.
Yeah. So what's the point of this parity information?
Well, it acts as a sort of checksum, like a mathematical fingerprint.
Okay.
So if one drive fails, the system can use the remaining data and the parity information on the other drives to reconstruct the data that was on the failed drive.
Ah, so it can rebuild the missing data?
Exactly. So RAID 5 can tolerate the failure of one drive without losing any data.
Got it. So it's kind of like RAID 1 in that it provides redundancy,
Right.
but you're not using a whole drive just for mirroring.
Exactly. You get more usable storage space with RAID 5.
Okay, so what's the catch?
Well, there are a couple of catches. One is write performance.
Okay.
Because of the need to calculate and write this parity data, writes can be slower compared to RAID 0 or RAID 10.
Got it, because it's doing extra work.
Right. And when a drive does fail, the rebuild process can be quite time-consuming.
Oh, okay.
The system has to read data from all the remaining drives, calculate the missing data using the parity information, and then write that data to the new drive.
Got it.
And this whole process puts extra stress on those remaining drives, so there's a higher risk of another drive failing during the rebuild.
Right, so it's kind of a vulnerable time.
It is. RAID 5 also doesn't scale as well for random reads and writes as some other RAID levels. So it's a trade-off. You get good storage efficiency and the ability to survive a single drive failure,
Right.
but you might have slower writes and longer, riskier rebuild times.
Okay.
So you really have to weigh those factors.
So who would use RAID 5?
It's a good option for things like file servers or web servers where you need a good balance of storage space and protection against a single drive failure,
Right.
but you don't have extremely high demands for random read and write performance.
Okay, that makes sense. What about RAID 6? Is that similar?
It is. RAID 6 is basically an extension of RAID 5.
Okay.
The main difference is that it uses 2 sets of parity information.
2 sets.
Yeah, that's right. So this means it can handle the failure of 2 drives at the same time without losing any data.
Oh, wow. So double the protection.
Exactly. It's like RAID 5 on steroids. At Stonefly, we often recommend RAID 6 for really critical applications or larger storage arrays where the chance of multiple drive failures is higher.
Right.
It's that extra layer of safety.
But of course, there's a trade-off, right?
There is, yeah. With 2 sets of parity, you lose even more storage space.
Okay.
And the write performance is also generally slower than RAID 5 because the system has to calculate and write 2 sets of parity information for every write.
Got it.
And rebuild times are even longer because it has to process more data.
So you give up some storage and some speed,
Yep.
but you get that extra peace of mind.
Exactly. It's all about balancing those factors based on your specific needs.
When would you recommend RAID 6 then?
We usually recommend it for mission-critical data and for large arrays where the risk of multiple drive failures is higher.
Okay.
So if you have a lot of drives and you absolutely cannot afford to lose any data, RAID 6 is a good option.
So those are all the different RAID levels. Now let's talk about something we touched on earlier, this whole motherboard RAID
Yeah.
versus dedicated RAID solutions.
Right.
One of the videos we watched called it Adventures in Motherboard RAID. And let me tell you, they weren't kidding.
Yeah, it can be a bit of a nightmare.
So generally speaking, motherboard RAID, it's either software-based or it uses a less powerful controller that shares resources with the CPU.
Right.
And this can cause some problems.
It can.
And, you know, at Stonefly, we build dedicated storage hardware, so we really advocate for dedicated RAID solutions, especially in a professional setting. What kind of issues are we talking about here with motherboard RAID?
Well, one common issue is instability.
Okay.
Motherboard RAID can be more prone to driver problems and compatibility issues, especially when you update your operating system.
Right.
Performance can also be inconsistent and often much slower than what you get with a dedicated RAID controller.
Okay.
And because the CPU is handling a lot of the RAID processing in software-based solutions, it can slow down your whole system,
Oh, wow.
especially when you're doing a lot of disk activity.
So it's not just that the storage is slower, but the whole computer can become slower.
Right, exactly. It can be a real bottleneck.
The video we watched mentioned Intel VROC.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
So Intel VROC, which stands for Virtual RAID on CPU, it's an interesting case. It does use some hardware acceleration, but it's often limited by marketing and licensing restrictions.
Okay.
So you might need to use specific Intel SSDs, for example, or even buy a hardware key to unlock certain RAID levels.
Wow.
It's not very user-friendly.
No, it's not.
And
though.
even when it does work, the performance can be inconsistent.
So more trouble than it's worth.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a good idea in theory, but the implementation is lacking.
Okay. And what about AMD's RAID? The video was pretty critical of that, too.
The main concerns were inconsistent performance, especially with RAID 1 and RAID 10.
Yeah.
And there were issues with trim support for SSDs, which can lead to slower SSD performance over time.
Right.
There were also some worries about error handling.
Okay.
The AMD RAID system sometimes didn't report drive errors correctly. And what's even more surprising is that in some cases, basic software RAID built into the operating system actually performed better than the dedicated AMD RAID driver.
Oh, wow. So that's not good.
No, it's not. It really highlights the limitations of motherboard RAID. And at Stonefly, our own testing has shown similar inconsistencies with software-based RAID. It's just not as reliable as dedicated hardware.
Okay. So motherboard RAID, not ideal on either platform.
Not really, no.
What's the better alternative?
Dedicated hardware RAID controllers.
Okay. Tell us more about those.
They're separate cards that you add to your computer.
Okay.
They have their own processor and memory, specifically designed for managing RAID arrays.
Okay.
And they offer several advantages over motherboard RAID. They're much faster, more consistent, and more stable.
Yeah.
They also have more features, better driver support, and they're just more reliable overall.
So if you're serious about RAID,
Yeah,
dedicated hardware is the way to go.
pretty much.
Okay. The video also mentions software RAID that's built into operating systems like Windows and Linux.
Right.
What's the deal with that?
So software RAID, it can be an okay option, especially for data that's not your main operating system. It doesn't require a separate RAID controller card, so it's cheaper.
Right.
But it uses the CPU for all the RAID processing, so it can slow things down. And it usually doesn't have all the fancy features of dedicated hardware.
So it's fine for basic stuff, but not for anything mission critical.
Exactly. If you need top performance and reliability, dedicated hardware is the way to go.
Okay. So avoid motherboard RAID, consider dedicated hardware, and software RAID is okay for secondary storage.
Yep.
So how do you actually choose the right RAID level for your needs?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the answer, as always, is it depends.
Okay, on what?
It depends on what you need, what you're trying to achieve. You need to balance performance, redundancy, storage capacity, your budget,
Right.
and the complexity you're comfortable with.
Okay.
And that's something that Stonefly, as a solutions company, we help our customers with every day.
Yep.
We analyze their needs and recommend the right storage solutions. And if you need help figuring out what's best for you, you can always reach out to us at sales@stonefly.com.
Absolutely. And it's not just about finding the best RAID level in some abstract sense, right?
Right.
It's about solving a specific problem.
Exactly. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to make things as fast as possible, even if it means a higher risk of data loss, assuming you have good backups? Then maybe RAID 0 is an option.
Okay.
Do you need basic redundancy for a small but critical data set? Maybe RAID 1 is the way to go. Do you need a balance of performance and fault tolerance for a server? RAID 10 is a popular choice there.
Okay.
Do you need good storage efficiency and protection against one drive failing? RAID 5 might be good.
Got it.
And if you need even more protection, if you need to be able to survive 2 drives failing at the same time, RAID 6 offers that.
Right.
It really depends on your specific needs and what you're trying to achieve.
So you have to know your priorities and then match those to the different RAID levels. Yeah.
Exactly. And one last thing, it's really important to remember that RAID, no matter which level you choose,
Yeah.
it's not a substitute for a good backup strategy.
You keep saying that, and I think it's really sinking in.
Good. Because you should always have a separate backup plan in place to protect against data loss that RAID just can't handle.
So RAID and backups, two sides of the same coin.
Precisely. And at Stonefly, our backup and DIR solutions are designed to work seamlessly with our RAID-based storage offerings.
Okay, so it's a complete solution.
It is.
Now, the video also briefly mentioned caching technologies, things like Primo Cache and AMD StorMI.
Yeah.
How do those fit into this whole storage picture?
So caching is different from RAID.
Okay.
Caching is all about making things faster by storing frequently accessed data in a really fast location, like RAM or an SSD.
Okay.
So it's like having a shortcut to your most used files.
Got it.
RAID, on the other hand, combines multiple drives into one logical volume for performance or redundancy.
Right.
Or both.
So they serve different purposes.
They do. RAID is about organizing your storage and protecting it, while caching is about making it faster so they can actually work together.
Got it.
You can have a RAID array that's also cached, which gives you the best of both worlds.
Okay, so they're complementary.
Exactly. And at Stonefly, we often use sophisticated caching mechanisms in our storage solutions to make them even faster.
So to wrap up our RAID deep dives,
Yeah.
it's a really powerful way to combine multiple drives
Uh-huh.
to get either more performance, more redundancy,
Right.
or a combination of both.
Yep. Right.
We've seen how RAID 0 and RAID 1,
Yeah.
they offer those basic solutions,
quite.
those clear trade-offs. And then the more advanced RAID levels,
Yeah.
like RAID 5, 6, and 10,
Right.
they provide more sophisticated balances of performance and fault tolerance.
They do.
We also talked about how motherboard RAID can be problematic
Yes.
and how dedicated hardware RAID controllers are usually the better option. And finally, we emphasize that you really have to understand your needs and your priorities when you're choosing a RAID level.
Right.
And always remember that RAID is not a replacement for backups.
Couldn't agree more.
Stonefly has been helping customers with all this for over 20 years.
Yeah,
So we know what we're talking about.
we do.
That's a great summary of our RAID discussion.
It is. And choosing the right storage architecture, including RAID,
Yep.
it's one of the most important decisions you can make when it comes to your data and your system's reliability. And Stonefly, with our expertise in SAN, NAS, S3 object storage, backup and DAR, and cloud technology,
Yeah.
we can provide solutions that meet all kinds of needs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as storage technology keeps evolving, understanding RAID is more important than ever.
It is. It's the foundation of so much of what we do in the storage world.
So what other questions do you have about data storage and management?
Yeah, what are you struggling with?
What are you facing in your own storage setup?
What are you curious about?
Exploring these questions will help you navigate this world of storage solutions.
Exactly.
And remember, Stonefly, we've been doing this for over 2 decades.
Yep.
We're a pioneer in the industry.
We are?
You can find more information at stonefly.com
Yes.
or reach out to our team at sales@stonefly.com for personalized guidance.
We'd love to hear from you.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.